what's up? I'm Red Feather Free with Red Feather Free Shamanic Arts. Some people call me the Dragon Shaman. Today is a prefatory video for a series of videos that's going to be coming out over the next couple of days to do with the Christmas holiday, astrotheology, alchemy, shamanism, herbalism, Gnostic traditions, theology, religion, science, astronomy, all of it. It's all connected to this time of year and this holiday. Yesterday was December 21st, 2014, the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, and last night was the longest night of the year. And hence this video and the series of videos are going to be called The Dark Night of the Soul, an exploration into the meaning of Christmas. Christ Mass, meaning the dinner of the Anointed One, or the dinner of the at-one-ment, of the atonement. Now what do we hear in the songs of Christmas? He'll know if you've been naughty, he'll know if you've been nice. That's atonement. Atonement is judgment, which is what the entire holiday is all about. The death, the judgment, the oneness, the realization of oneness in love, forgiveness, and then resurrection, eternal life being granted to the Spirit. We find the story going all the way back into the oldest mythological traditions that we can find to date, but the Gnostic tradition teaches that they go all the way even farther back into the antediluvian times, meaning pre-flood, i.e. the times of Atlantis and Mu, some 15, 20, 25,000, 50,000, a quarter million years ago. And we still find archaic forms of this worship today in areas of Siberia and in the Amazon jungle and in the mountains of Mexico and places where the shamans are still taking the sacred mushroom, as written about by John M. Allegro in his book The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, the Amanita muscaria, which he proves philologically that all the names of the gods and all the stories associated with them, especially the Christian mythos and the story of Jesus the Christ, are allegories and are stories about the herbs and the knowledge, the ancient knowledge that the priests kept secret and hidden, because it's what allowed them their power, what allowed them to be perceived as magic, as all-powerful or omnipotent, and thus allow the people underneath them, the sheep, to follow the shepherd. However, in modern times, we are all to be our own shepherds and no longer sheep. This is what all the great sages have wanted. They have not wanted people to follow them. They have not wanted followers. They've wanted people to lead themselves. Love thy neighbor as you love yourself. If you lead yourself and you love yourself, you'll extend the love and the leadership to your neighbor as well. And he likewise will extend it to you. And leadership is setting an example. That's what leadership is. It's not directing, it's not micromanaging. A true leader leads from the front. He sets the example for others to follow. And that's what we, as prophets and as shamans and as sages and magi or wise men throughout history, have tried to do, is to emulate the example of the way, or of the Tao, as we have found it to work for us. Because to quote a 14th century Mongol ruler, a Khan, there are many ways, many paths to Tengir. Not every path works for every man, and it's up to each man to find his path. Hence why the Oracle at Delphi told us to know thyself. Is in order to get to the Almighty Father in heaven, back to the absolute, the concept of the absolute that all ancient traditions throughout the world have held. Truly, everything can be considered monotheistic at its root and pantheistic in its shallow level. All the ancients understood that everything ultimately disseminated from one seed, one divine ultimate spark, the absolute, the chaos before conformity. And that we all can trace our roots back to that, if you will. That we all come from that one seed, and we're all ultimately connected as one. Which is what the mysteries of this time of year are all about. And it gets back to the story of Isis and Osiris, and the tree, the Christmas tree, the tree of life, is us. And the lights on the tree of life correspond to our chakras. as well as literally the experience that we see when we activate our pineal gland through things like DMT and other magic substances like herbs and plants, which have been used by the Magi, or the wise men, for time eternal. The same wise men who looked at the stars and saw the signs of the heavens portending, and they saw Sirius rising, and they knew that Saturn was in his return at that particular time, and that it had been foretold that at the end of the age there would come a prophet. And that's when Jesus came. And they went to the city of Bethlehem, which is, again, meaning from the line of Ham. And Ham goes back to Tubal-Cain. Ham was the son of Noah, but comes from the pre-flood time, from the line of Cain. Tubal-Cain taught Ham the arts of Cain. And if you read in the Zohar, as I will illustrate when I study the 3 books of occult philosophy, edited and annotated by Donald Tyson, that in the Zohar it tells us that Eve, in the 130-year period after they were kicked out of the garden for partaking of the fruit, and the time that Adam would not procreate with her after Cain did what he did, supposedly, the spirits, we're told, came and copulated with Eve, and thus created the sons of God, or the race of heroes. And at the same time, we're told that Adam was copulating with 2 she-demons, Lilith and Nama, and that they were creating a race of demons. So we have descendant from Eve, before Adam and Eve began procreating again, descended from Eve in the spirits, the race of God, the sons of God, the wise men, the sons of Ham, or the sons of Cain today, as we would know them. And then from Adam and Lilith and Nama descend the demons, the devils. All of this is ancient Kabbalistic tradition, and it's encoded in many different myriad of forms and symbols, numerologically, architecturally, geomantically, in music and in literature, allegorically. The mushroom is represented throughout literature and symbolism in all the world's religions. It's the serpent. And it's the idea of reciprocity, or the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. What goes around comes around, literally. Karma, the wheel. Immortality and the virgin birth are also speaking of the mushroom and the mysteries of the mushroom, but also the time of year when souls of a specific makeup are to be born. Born of a virgin, the Savior, the King, who's born of a virgin, describes a man who's born at a specific time of year. And the alchemical makeup or admixture of his soul of the elements, the mixture of light and dark, make him a balanced man. Someone who's able to walk in both the light and the dark. And this is what the man Jesus Christ was. He was born of a virgin, which means the constellation Virgo. He was conceived in the heart of darkness. Now, the time of Christmas, this nadir, 9 months from now, his body will be born, but his soul's conception comes in to matter at this particular time. His first birth, if you will. His second birth is in Virgo in September. And if you look in the Mayan calendar, 4 is when the 9 wise men were supposed to have descended into the being as deity, which is allegorically, I believe the Mayans were the keepers of the ancient Kabbalistic tradition in its purest form. And when the church fathers arrived, they found this pure and pristine form of the ancient Gnosis tradition that hadn't been eradicated by them or hadn't been destroyed over the last 1400, 1500 years of fire branding and executions and burnings at the stake and library burnings carried out by the Roman Catholic rule. The combination of church and state, which still dominates the world today. Even though we claim to be a secular rule in America, we are ruled by church and state as one. Yes, we are. You may not think that is the truth, but it is the truth. We do not have freedom to pursue our spiritual enlightenment in America as we see fit, with the ancient tradition of using the plants and the herbs, which have been known for time immemorial to give man spiritual experiences, also known as entheogenic experiences, i.e. the near-death experience, which is a fractal of the sun's yearly death here at this particular time, the winter solstice. He dies on the 21st, he stays in hell for 3 days, and he's resurrected on the 25th, born again, triumphant, the newborn king, risen. We get the tradition of giving gifts at this time of year because in the judgment hall, traditionally the shaman or the dead person gives gifts to the lord of the underworld in order to please him and placate him. We find this tradition in Egypt, in the Egyptian mythology, as well as the shamanic Tengiri philosophy practiced by the Siberian shamans to this day. It is universal. We are all one, and as the Mayan prophecies so long ago predicted, the world would come back to this ancient knowledge. After we went through all the strife and the cataclysms that we've been going through, we would ultimately reconnect and find our roots and our heritage in the same place, and that all the peoples of humanity are nothing but different fruits hanging from the same tree. We're all grafted onto the same vine. I thank you for tuning in. Please share this video. Please consult me. Contact me via Google Hangouts and via my phone number on my profile. Please. For my services, a consultation, a tarot reading, a rune reading, advice on nutrition or health, spiritual guidance, counseling, I do it all. If you're feeling depressed or even suicidal, I've been trained when I was in the military for coordination and intervention. And also I've been working with post-traumatic stress disorder for years and years and years myself, and I've got quite a bit of experience in counseling on how to go about setting yourself aright with yourself so that you can get to a place where your temple, where your mind and your body are capable of accepting the spirit. Because let's be honest, that's the problem that we live in today. We live with so many shells or veils around our body that the spirit cannot be recognized, that it cannot come in. We've defiled our temple so much that it is not a suitable host for the word, for the living spirit anymore. We're more or less in modern times, a lot of people run around and walk around like zombies, completely and totally unaware of who and what they really are. But as Christ, the man, said in John, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." That we are beings of eternal light and life and spirit. It can be best summed up as the living effigy, the byproduct. We are Horus, that is the byproduct of the union, the sexual union between Osiris and Isis, between the Father, between fire and the earth. Gives rise to the air and the water. What happens at the junctures of the zodiac between fire and earth except for storms? This is the ancient knowledge handed down astrotheologically. They would predict the auspicious days when fire and earth would unite and would bring the sacred rain, the sacred semen from the skies to impregnate the earth and give rise to the creation, to the life-giving sustenance of the plants to be eaten by the animals so that the animals could digest them and give fertilizer back to the plants and then die and give nutrients back to the ground and the earth itself and keep the entire circle of life going around in a spiral, ever onward and ever upwards, and the spiral of evolution and creation. And it's not always upwards, you know, it's not always a linear projection upwards. Sometimes there's a correction downwards and then back upwards and downwards and back upwards, but ultimately it's a spiral that's going in the Fibonacci sequence exponentially into infinity, back towards the union with the absolute from which we came. Eventually we'll have to eat our own tail and the entire cycle will begin again. Maybe under a new set of laws or rules, as have been predicated from this go-round. Who knows? According to the ancient Gnostic traditions, the iterations or the existences before this existence were very much by a different set of rules, hence the reason why they didn't work or didn't last. I love you all. As I recognize myself in you, I try to love myself more every day, and therefore love you more every day. Just like Jesus says in the Bible, if you truly believe in your heart anything that you want and you pray for, you will receive. However, you first must forgive those whom you harbor ill will against, whom have trespassed against you. You must issue forgiveness first before you can have forgiveness, because if you hold a grudge in your heart, your prayers and your desires will not be received. You have to have a clean heart, no regret, no grudges. It has to balance against the feather of truth on the scales of justice. I look forward to bringing you the next series of these videos, as I'm going to get into much deeper scholarship, reading you excerpts from Carl Gustav Jung's Mysterium Conjunctions, James Avery's Mushrooms and Mankind, Cornelius Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy, the Egyptian Book of the Dead translated by Wallace Budge, the Mayan book of the Jaguar priest, the Chilam Balam. The list goes on. The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross by John M. Allegro, the Kabbalah Denudata by Mathers, Cumorah Revisited, the Book of Mormon, the Holy Bible, the Rig Vedas, the Norse traditions, Aleister Crowley's The Book of Thoth and the Tarot. I'll be consulting all of these things over the next few days to show you just how all of this is connected and involved on a very, very deep level. In Lakesh, namaste. Hello, I'm Red Feather Free of Red Feather Free's Shamanic Arts. Thank you for tuning in. The Law of Attraction has brought you this video. If you're not already a subscriber, I strongly encourage you to become one. I also blog on the Tao of the Shaman, and I use Google Plus as my social media outlet, where I share all sorts of articles, thoughts, memes, quotes, poetry, art that I like, music. And I enjoy making friends primarily all throughout the world. I love you all. You're all awesome, awesome, awesome people. This is the introductory video to The Dark Night of the Soul, of which I published a prefatory video yesterday. And it is 7:01 a.m. December 23rd, 2014. I began this video at 7:00 a.m. This is the heart of darkness. The darkest part of the night has just eclipsed. As the black begins to fade to blue outside, signaling that dawn's early light is about to arrive, and her golden hair is about to stretch forth across the horizon like the beautiful golden horses pulling Apollo's chariot across the sky. Pulling the sun out of the darkest and longest night that it experiences throughout the entire year. It's literally the middle of the abyss that it just went through, the middle of hell that it's rising out of right now, and it's got one more day to go before it begins to be reborn and then travel northward again. Because see, the sun it goes around and makes 4 points on a cross, which is the 4 points on the cross of Christianity. North, south, east, and west correspond to the winter and summer solstices, the spring and fall equinoxes, among many other things. The 4 seasons, the 4 phases of life, birth, adulthood, old age, death, reintegration, resurrection, all one thing there, which is what the whole mood of the season is truly all about. The Dark Night of the Soul is about Negrito and death, and killing the bad, purging the old by facing it through meditation, through detachment, which is like a form of dying from the world, and then order to be reborn like a phoenix from the fire. I'm reading you a brief excerpt in this introduction from The Dark Night of the Soul, published by St. John the Divine. And in this copy's introduction, it tells us it was written as a compliment to the ascent of the Mount, to the ascent of Mount Carmel, as well They were meant to supplement one another. The former book, The Ascent of Mount Carmel, deals with active purgation of the senses, the intellect, and the will. That is, with the need for and the manner of a complete mortification of these powers. Complete death, mortification. That's what he's saying. So far as God's grace, it can be carried out by man's own exertions. The Dark Night, this book, treats of the passive purgation of the same faculties brought about by divine intervention, which steps in where human endeavors fail. The two books were written about the same time, soon after St. John's escape from captivity in 1578. Both have for their text the stanzas he appears to have composed in memory of that event. Both are left unfinished. And on page 30, at the conclusion of chapter 7, which concludes St. John's teachings on the 7 capital sins, pride, anger, envy, sloth, gluttony, vanity, etc. He says, "In that night, the dark night, this night, he weans from the breast of sweetness and pure aridities and interior darkness, cleanses them from all these imperfections and childish ways, and by ways most different makes them grow in virtue. For after all the exertions of beginners to mortify themselves in their actions and passions, their success will not be perfect, or even great, until God himself shall do it for them in the purgation of the dark night. May God be pleased to give me his light, that I may speak profitably of this, for I have great need of it while treating of a night so dark and a subject so difficult. As do I, as have I taken upon myself a great task in making this series of videos, and I hope to live up to the task and to convey the profound nature of this time of year and the holiday and what it represents for all of humanity, and not just one religion or the other, but all of us. It's a time of the year that represents death and rebirth, and as we are all one in representations as the microcosm of the macrocosm, we too experience things in our life that, as it says here, God himself will come in and give us a dark night that we need in order to put us on the path, the straight path, the middle path. The shortest point between, or the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And oftentimes in life, that dark night, when it's happening, is when we're at our weakest, and it's when we need to be our strongest. Because, as he's explained in these previous 7 chapters, it's the 7 spiritual sins that we commit: anger over the loss of spiritual sweetness, or when meditation becomes difficult, or when our expectations aren't met, or when we see others excelling past us, all these things. We're becoming overly proud of our achievements at the expense of remembering that it's the Almighty, the Absolute, that is the real, and that we are reflections of him, or it, and it is the ultimate measure of what is real, and not us, or not this. A part of us inside is. I love you all. I want everyone to have a wonderful time meditating and reflecting upon the oneness and the unity of all things, and the beauty of the gift of life that we are given, and the beauty of the light that shines down on us every day and keeps us warm and grows our crops and gives us fire from the inside to live and to breathe and to bang our drums and sing our songs and to write our songs, write our poetry and write our books and play our music and create our art. It's that fire inside that passion. The alchemical significance of this time of year is that, it being December 23rd, it's the second day of Capricorn. Capricorn began yesterday, December 22nd, and it just ended on December 21st at midnight, the house of Sagittarius, which was a fire sign ruled by the planet Mercury. And Mercury was known as the Sun Wolf. Also, he was known as Hermes or Thoth. Hermes in Greece and Thoth in Egypt. Enki in Sumeria. He was the god who gave mankind the knowledge of magic originally, and geomancy, pyromancy, aeromancy, hydromancy, chiromancy, palmistry, all the arts, architecture, mathematics. He was the progenitor, the swift messenger of the gods, the archetypal proto-man, if you will. He was Adam. And we just transitioned into Capricorn, which is ruled by the planet Saturn. And Saturn is dark and dense, and he's portrayed in Capricorn as riding a dragon, dressed in a black cloth with a scythe in one hand and a staff in the other, or a fish in the other. And the fish connects him with the symbol of Jesus and death and the dark night of the soul. Now, alchemically, the union of the opposites are special times of the year. On the calendar round, the Mayan jaguar priest, the Chilam Balams, understood this quite well, and they would predict the auspicious days and the inauspicious days based off of the calendar. And the auspicious days were the days, for instance, when the union of opposites would occur, when the Conjunction would occur. The great work, the completion of the great work of alchemy would take place. You have a union of opposites. You have fire, Mercury, and Earth, Saturn, death, Kronos, Father Time. And in these opposites being combined and these poles being forced together, the North and South meeting, you have a civil war that takes place, and that civil war creates the blood and the semen of heaven, the great magical substance that falls from the sky and gives life to the earth and brings the life, the living creatures and the beings out of it. It's the union, the sexual union. Hence why John M. Allegro's book, Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, states that Christianity is a fertility cult. I say it's a fertility cult and ancestor worship, because we recognize that we came from this and we are this, like an onion. We're just the inside of the onion that thinks it's somehow part of another onion, and it analyzes the onion it's in a strange way, instead of recognizing it's part of the integral whole. Now, as you can see behind me, there's clouds. Yes, that's air that's condensed and formed moisture in the sky. From the union of these two opposites, of fire and earth, it's produced the cups and the swords. So between the material and the heavens, the mother and the father, you have the son and daughter. Corresponds to the tarot, the wands, fire, produces, when it is combined with earth, forced together, it produces the pair of swords and cups, which corresponds to mind, spirit, soul, and body, or wands, swords, cups, and discs, father, son, daughter, mother, and many, many, many other correspondences that I could go on and on and on and on about. Light and dark, yin and yang, again, positive and negative. The dragon and the phoenix. So you have the dragon, or Cthulhu, and the phoenix, the risen, resurrected, the eagle, if you will, of wisdom. Darkness and light, masculine, feminine, right, left, even, odd, clear, dark, wisdom, fear, and ignorance. It's both, good and evil. It's all what it represents, and this time of year represents literally the heart of hell, of the abyss, that the Son, our Father who art in heaven, who's the symbol of the Absolute, who has the power to create such things, such marvels as the heavens, that we live in, that we are part of, that we are, that is inside us, is now in the bottom of his journey, marking the death on the cross, literally the lowest point of the year. The southernmost point of the sun's journey is the death on the cross, the yearly, annular cross that is made up of the southern point of the winter solstice, the northern point of the summer solstice, and the eastern point of the spring equinox, the western point of the fall equinox. It corresponds also to man and the dark night of the soul and shamanic journey. For instance, the death of the ego. Jesus spent 3 days in the tomb and was resurrected. That is true. Literally, the initiation of the pyramids, talked about by Plato, was supposedly a member or initiated of, as well as Pythagoras, as well as Solon, as well as many other Greeks that we read about. They talk about this, and the initiation of the pyramid was supposedly a ritual that lasted 3 days, where you were taken down into the depths of the initiation chamber, kept given a cycle of sacred substances by the high priests, and then on the third day you were brought out facing the east with the rising sun to be resurrected. And I believe you can read about this in, I want to say, James Archer's Mushrooms and Mankind. From where I live, and it's wonderful. It goes back to the ultimate symbolism and why this time of year is associated with the mushroom and why it was so important, is because not only did certain times of the year predict astrologically and astronomically, were the ancients able to predict when the rains would occur, when the storms would occur, but also this corresponded to when the magic helpers, the gods, the mushrooms, the sacred mushrooms, the amanitas and the psilocybins, would grow and would pop up. It was not coincidental that these things happened together, because as John Allegro says eloquently in his book, the ancients understood that this one particular herb, the sacred herb, contained more of the vital force, more of the vital semen of God, if you will, energy, potent force, energy, than any other plant on the planet. And I myself, through personal experience, know this to be true. Very, very, very true. And if you understand it fully, as I do, and some others do as well, and have published about, then you too will know it's the truth, and it will set you free. It is the bread of life. It will grant you everlasting spiritual life. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no turning back. There's no turning that light off. It is an ever-burning lamp that, once lit, will burn and burn and burn and burn. You cannot deny it. Once it's inside you, it grows, it builds. At first, when I heard the word after I went through the journey, because I died and was resurrected over Passover this year of 2014. I made videos documenting it afterwards, my experience with the Amanita the first time, after I received the tarot cards for Christmas last year. My life has been a crazy journey over the last year. Of explosive nuclear mushroom expansion. Where before I was already going and going and going and expanding into gnosis, but it was exponential after. It was as if someone had turned on lights in a warehouse that was filled with information from eons and eons and eons, that I could access at lightning speed, and that I had been so familiar with, as it was if I had written it myself, and it's still that way to a large extent. I can pick up almost any book that I have and go right to the exact right location in it. It's weird, and that's not with everything. It's just the message that I'm seeking at that time. For instance, if I feel like I need to make a video about Christmas and the dark night and death, I'll look at my library and I'll just go with what psychic feeling I have of what book I need to read, and I'll just pull it out and I'll open it up to whatever random place that the spirit, nature, whatever the architect has ordained, and I'll begin reading the first place I see and generally go down. Let's do it now. This is from the Library of Christian Classics, the Spiritual and Anabaptist Writers. Dr. Luther writes further in his answer. In addition to this, he continues with Eutychianism and creaturelessness misleads the church, though God gave him no command nor sent him. He means me. I cannot understand what he means here with Eutychianism, or whether or not, as with others, he means thereby the denial of the humanity of Christ. I know very well, however, that elsewhere, for example, is on the Councils and the Churches published in 1539, he writes that Eutyches, that was not Eutyches' view, to consider Christ only a divine person in nature and not man, but rather that he held Christ to be true God and man, and that he simply did not wish to ascribe the idiomata of properties of deity to this humanity. Thus all prophets, all scripture ascribing to Christ or the Messiah an eternal kingdom and salvation from sins are against all Eutyches, for all of them say that the seed of the woman will bruise the head of the serpent. Genesis chapter 13. Thus Dr. Luther writes about Eutyches. So there you go. Eutyches. Christ was not just a divine figure. He was man and divinity. He was the microcosm and the macrocosm, as we all are. Thank you, and stay tuned for the rest. The Dark Night of the Soul, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and the Judgment. An excerpt and reading from the Egyptian Book of the Dead with a new introduction by John Romer, published by Penguin Books. Copyright 2008. Reading you an excerpt from beginning on page 21, The Judgment. The bookmark tells us a relaxed mind is a creative mind. And this is the first part of The Dark Night of the Soul, a Christmas story. We're beginning with Egyptian mythology, so I found it most suitable to depict the sacred mysteries that are unfolding right now, astronomically and astrologically. As this is December 23rd, I'm making this video. It's the absolute apex of the nadir, if you will. And that seems like a paradox. How can a nadir be an apex? But it is the absolute bottom of the bottom, if you will, of the sun's yearly round from north to south and east to west. We begin reading. The judgment scene, which is a description here given, forms a very important section of the Book of the Dead. It follows the two more hymns with which a large papyrus opens and seems to occupy a suitable place and to form a fitting introduction to the selections of the chapters of Coming Forth by Day, which follow it. We're told, these chapters refer to and deal with the events which took place in the life of the deceased, who has succeeded in entering the realm of Osiris, the god of the dead. But they, of necessity, were absolutely useless to anyone who had not passed the judgment and had been permitted by this god to enter his dominions. Those who were condemned in the judgment were devoured straightway by the eater of the dead and ceased to exist. And by that, they mean being put down back into material, because the eater of the dead was known as Typhon, and Typhon is typhoon, and that's another symbol of the swirl energy, or discs, or matter. So the soul that was on the threshold or on the judgment of getting to evolve or go higher dimensionally into pure spirit goes back down and ceases to, quote, exist. It has to go back to the root of material and work its way back up through the process again. Continues. The judgment scene is given in the large papyri seems to have been developed from the vignette which illustrates one of the chapters of the heart, in which special reference is made to the weighing of the heart, or from one which, properly speaking, belonged to the other chapter, where and when the judgment took place is unknown, but the original idea seems to have been that the broad heavens, or a certain portion of them, formed the judgment hall, and that the judgment took place in the presence of the three companies of the gods. As the hand of the funeral company, Osiris occupied a very prominent position, the head of the funeral company, and he eventually became the sole judge of the dead. The judgment of each individual seems to have taken place soon after death, and annihilation of everlasting life and bliss to have been decreed at once for the souls of the dead. There are no sufficient grounds for assuming that the Egyptians believed either in a general resurrection or in a protracted punishment. That is a complete and total fictition. As I just told you, they understood fully that by going into the mouth of Typhon, you were being cast back down into the root of material at the base of the tree of life to have to work your way in a spiral fashion back up to the crown, from the root to the crown, so that you could go back into union with the Absolute, because it is through the crown that the Absolute is connected to us through the tree of life. How far they thought that the prayers of the living for the dead were efficacious in arresting or modifying the decree of doom cannot be said, except for they must have placed some significant weight upon it, since their entire religion and life and culture were based upon this efficacious magic that they practiced for their dead, the rights of the dead, which are truly to be understood as the rights of the living. But very considerable importance, we read, was attached by them to the funeral prayers and ceremonies in all ages, and there is no doubt that they were the outcome of the firm belief that they would result in the salvation and well-being of the souls of the dead. The salvation, meaning the saving, the well-being, meaning the resurrection, the life, sustainment of our Father who art in heaven, Tingir, Ra, the Aten, the solar sun disk, Apollo, Helios, also known as Lucifer, or Christos, Christ, the light, the bright and morning star, the Son of, quote, God, the Absolute. It's a symbol, but unfortunately it's been taken and idolized and worshipped as the actual object of the unknowable, unnameable, undefinable Absolute itself, which is a profane blasphemy and idolatry, and it's exactly what's happened in almost every religion around the planet. The first sages and teachers who bring the wisdom through their enlightenment, their experiences with the plants and their ways, their knowledge of Kabbalah and the magic of the plants and the numbers and the stars in the sky and the elements of alchemy, they're usually turned into the idols for which the people that didn't fully understand their more deep, profound spiritual teachings, and or did, and want to use it against other people because they see that it could be used as potential power over people who want to only go so far. But all the great teachers have said, don't follow me, follow your own path. There are many paths to get to heaven. Not every one works for every man, but they all lead to the same point, you see. And that is ultimately this judgment in the judgment hall. That's what has been used as a fear tool by the Catholic Church and the Christian religion so hardcore for eons and eons and eons. The thing here that you have to understand with the judgment is that it's a judgment of yourself versus a contract that your spirit took with your body, and yourself, your soul and your spirit kind of engaged in when they were incarnated, when they were cast into this lower realm of 3 dimensions. And we are all connected in one, but because we get to experience self-consciousness, meaning the illusion of separation from the whole, we can perceive ourselves as being independent. That's where the death comes in, is the death deludes the ego and casts away the illusion of separation and gives you oneness. But in order to get into the actual place, the hall of death, you have to pass through the gates of judgment and have your heart weighed. And that determines whether or not you get sent back down into the material world, as I said, to the root of the tree of life, to have to spiral back up. And the scales of justice are fair depending on how far out of balance your heart was from the scales of truth. Basically depends on how far back down the tree of life you have to be cast in order to climb back up to the crown. It's the art of alchemy, elevating, evolving the soul spiritually up the tree of life, lighting the Christmas tree as you go with the chakras. Boom, from the root to the heart to the throat to the crown. To be simple, the 4 basic points, the cross. Here is a depiction of the scene itself. I don't know how you can see that in the book. And the vignette shows Anubis holding the scales, and one side of the scales is the feather of truth, Ma'at. On top of the scales, you see the cephalic symbol of Thoth, the monkey, the Hermes. And the other side is the canopic jar holding the deceased's heart. Behind the scales and behind Anubis, you see Thoth holding up the records of everything that the consciousness has done in its incarnation. Because Thoth is consciousness, it's all his mind. He is the eye that's watching you even when you're not watching yourself, so to speak. When you think no one else is watching and what you did you can just get away with, you're accountable. You're holding yourself accountable to yourself. And that's what Thoth represents. And behind Thoth is the zoomorphic beast, the eater of the dead, who's apparently part crocodile, part hippopotamus, and part cheetah, or part jaguar or leopard. And again, his name was Typhon. Typhon is a symbol for typhoon, and his equivalent for the Mayans was the god Huracan, which again is the spiral force, and this is the root or the disc force. The spiral energy is the engine that drives creation in the universe. It is not the absolute, it is more or less the law as is evident to us. This divine eternal spiral that keeps going, that is perfectly in balance because it never gets caught in the mire of one side or the other. By approximation, it walks the middle path because it goes through both the light and the dark equally and doesn't get caught in either side. So it progresses forward much faster than one or the other will ever. We read, the text, Osiris the scribe Ani saith to Osiris and the judge, my heart, my mother, my heart, my mother, my heart, my coming into being. May there be nothing to resist me at my judgment. May there be no opposition to me from the Chacha. May there be no partaking or no parting of thee from me in the presence of him that keepeth the scales. Thou art my Ka, within my body, knitteth together and strengthen my limbs. Mayest thou come forth to the place of happiness to which I am advancing. May the Shanit not cause my name to stink, and may no lies be spoken against me in the presence of the God. Good, good is it for thee to hear. Thoth, the judge of right and truth, of the great company of the gods who art in the presence of Osiris, saith, hear ye this judgment. The heart of Osiris hath in very truth been weighed, and his soul hath stood as witness for him. It hath been found true by trial in the great balance. There hath not been found any wickedness in him. He hath not wasted the offerings in the temples, and he hath not done harm by his deeds. And he hath uttered no evil reports while he was upon earth. The great company of the gods reply to Thoth, who dwelleth in Kin Menu, or Hermopolis, Hermopolis, the city of Hermes. That which cometh forth from thy mouth shall be declared true. Osiris, the scribe Ani, victorious, is holy and righteous. He hath not sinned, neither hath done evil against us. It shall not be allowed to the devourer of Amemet to prevail over him. Meat offerings and entrance into the presence of God Osiris shall be granted unto him, together with the homestead forever in Sekhet Hetepu, as unto the followers of Horus. Saith Horus, the son of Isis, I have come to thee, O Nefer, I have brought unto thee Osiris Ani. His heart is found righteous, and it hath come forth from the balance. It hath not sinned against any good, or any god or any goddess. Thoth hath waited according to the decree pronounced unto him by the company of the gods, and it is most true and righteous. Grant that cakes and ale may be given unto him, and let him appear in the presence of the god Osiris, and let him be like unto the followers of Horus forever and ever. May libations and cakes be given to him. May bread and wine be served to him in the hall of the king of the underworld. This is the same philosophy, this is the same mythology taught by the Tingirs in Mongolia when the shaman travels to the underworld to meet Erlik. He's given libations, or he gives libations to the god of the underworld. But to receive them is the same as to give, because we hear to give is to receive, do we not? So, as we pass through the judgment and the weighing of the heart, we're now into the heart of the abyss, which is Osiris's true chamber. Now, the descent and the judgment is where generally the flames occur, because that's where your life's deeds have to be pronounced. And if you've done wrong or committed sin, so to speak, one of the 7 spiritual sins, 7 deadly sins spoken of by Dante Alighieri, then you'll have regret. Your soul will have violated a contract. And therefore, generally, the sages believe that you have to come back and do it again. However, we've been given salvation. We've been given the sacrificial lamb, so to speak, which is the body of Christ, which is the sacrament itself, the sacred mushroom, the Amanita muscaria, the thing that can give us atonement with the God of the dead, i.e. the God of life, and show us the error of our ways in our life and how we have done wrong and what we have done wrong on our own accord, not from someone else telling us, but our own judgment, a reflection back on ourselves that is so pure it cannot be denied, and we are forced to look at it and take it. We cannot bury our head in the sand. And it's this that Muhammad and all the other prophets taught, to die before you die, because in the death before death you gain true liberation. You are circumcised from the material world, from the illusion that has kept you from being a full spiritual being and being awakened and resurrected as the phoenix from the death and the fire, which is what will happen on the 25th in a couple more days. And I look forward to bringing you more videos about that, especially concerning Carl Gustav Jung's Mysterium Conjunctions. Thank you. Please share these videos. Leave comments in the sections below. I want to know what you're thinking about this. Have a blessed season. Hello, I'm Red Feather Free, with Red Feather Free's Shamanic Arts. Some people call me the Dragon Shaman. Today is a continuation of part 1 of the video series, The Dark Night of the Soul, the Christmas story. The last installment, I read out of the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Today we're going to focus on Carl Gustav Jung's The Mysterium Conjunctions. We're going to begin with the mysteries of the moon, the orphan and the widow. Good morning. We're reading from the Bowling Green Series 20, The Collected Works of Carl Gustav Jung, Volume 14. Editors Sir Herbert Reed, Michael Fordham, Gerhard Alder. William McGuire, Executive Editor. This is a second edition, translated by RFC Hull, Princeton Press. Copyrighted 1989. And we're going to begin reading for today out of section 3, chapter 1 entitled The Components of the Conjunctio, and section 3 entitled The Orphan, the Widow, and the Moon. We're going to read sections 3 and 4. Section 4 is on alchemy and Manichaeism. I'll try to touch on the extensive notes that he has attached in the footnotes, but for the sake of brevity, I won't read all of them. I thank you, and I hope that you can gain as much insight from this as I can. And I'm going to provide my own commentary and my own notes and relate all of this to the overall theme of Christmas and alchemy and how I see the astro-theological connections to the fertility cult and serpent worship, the cult of the ancestors, where all the religions come from, the ideas that we have. So I'm going to go ahead and begin reading. On page 17 we begin. It says, in the text cited at the end of the last section, Dorn continues saying, quote, Hermes Trismegistus called the stone Orphan. Orphan, as the name of a precious stone, is found in Albertus Magnus. The stone was called Orphan because of its uniqueness. It was never elsewhere seen, and it was said to be in the emperor's crown. It was wine-colored and sometimes shone in the night, but nowadays it does not shine in the darkness. As Albertus Magnus was an authority on alchemy, he may have been in the direct source both for Dorn and Petrus Bonus. Orphan, as the name of a gem, may therefore mean something like the modern solitaire, a very apt name for the unique Lapis Philosophorum. Apart from Dorn and Petrus Bonus, it seems that this name is found only in the Carmina Heliodori. There it refers to the homeless orphan who is slain at the beginning of the work for purposes of transformation. The terms, quote, son of the widow and children of the widow appear to be Manichaean in origin. The Manichaeans themselves were called the, quote, children of the widow. The note here tells us it is said that in the Book of Secrets, Mani spoke of the son of the widow, Jesus. Bousset mentions the reign of a widow who will precede the Antichrist. And Freemasons are also reckoned among the, quote, children of the widow. Above all, we continue, and it says, the orphan referred to by Hermes must therefore have his counterpart, a vidua, or widow, as the prima materia. For this there are synonyms such as matter, matrix, Venus, Regina, Femina, Virgo, Puella, Pregnus, virgin in the center of the earth, Luna, Meretrix, which means whore, Vitula, old woman, and more specifically Vitula extenuatua, enfeebled, exhausted. And this is all terms for the mother, or Isis, which we will read further. Matter, alchemia, who is dropsical in the lower limbs and paralyzed from the knees down. And finally, virago. All these synonyms allude to the virginal or maternal quality of the prima materia, which exists without a man, and yet is the, quote, matter of all things. Above all, the prima materia is the mother of the lapis, the philosophorum, the filius philosophorum. Now, why are we interested in the matter and the matrix? Is because the sun is the consciousness that we perceive almost all year round, except for this one time of year between December 21st and December 25th for the 3 days, the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. The sun stands still in the lowest part of its yearly round. You could call it being in the abyss. It's died on the 21st, and it's going to be resurrected on the 25th, spending 3 days in the tomb. Well, this tomb is it going back into the mother. It's the sun returning back to the mother. It's what we were born out of the darkness. The sun came from the darkness, and symbolically it's returning to the darkness now to be regenerated back out of it again. Hence the Ouroboros. I'll continue. Michael Meyer mentions the treatise of an anonymous author, Delphinius, which he dates to some time before 1447. He stresses that this author insisted particularly on the mother-son incest. Meyer even constructs a genealogical tree showing the origin of the 7 metals. At the top of the tree is the lapis, and lapis is blue, meaning the sky, father, or Tengir. Again, uniting all the arcane philosophies, if you will, with the more advanced and refined philosophies of ancient Egypt, which were by far the most refined form of the ancient mystery schools that we have. Meyer even constructs a genealogical tree. Its father is Gabitrius, who in turn was born of Isis and Osiris. After the death of Osiris, Isis married their own son, Gabitrius. She is identified with Bea. The widow marries her son. The widow appears here as the classical figure of the mourning Isis. To this event, Meyer devotes a special epithalamium in honor of the nuptials of Mother Bea and her son Gabitrius. But this marriage, which was begun with the expression of great joyfulness, ended in the bitterness of mourning, says Meyer, adding the verses, within the flower itself there grows the gnawing canker. Where honey is, there gall. Where swelling breast, there canker. This gets to the illusion of the Norse mythology of Yggdrasil and the Tree of Life, which constantly has the worm gnawing at its roots. From every seed of creation is born also the seed of its own destruction. For when the son sleeps with the mother, she kills him with the stroke of a viper. Vipirino Kanatu. This viciousness recalls the murderous role of Isis, who laid the, quote, noble worm in the path of the Heavenly Father Ra. The note here reads, Priesdanes, quote, reads, I am Isis, who am called dew, synonymous with aqua vitae. The relation of the soul-comforting water of the Nile to Isis is indicated on a bas relief. And the soul-comforting water of the Nile rising, being associated with Isis, also associates Christ and the Christ energy with Isis as well, because Sirius, the star that rose, signaling the coming rains and the rise of Isis, or the rise of the Nile, was associated, as I've stated, with the birth of Christ, and the Virgin, or the Virgo. And Christ could be considered Gabetrius. Isis is Mother Mary. Osiris is the Almighty Father in heaven, to equate the Christian mythology. Isis, however, is also the healer, for she not only cured Ra for the poisoning, but put together the dismembered Osiris. As such, she personifies the arcane substance, be it dew or the aqua permanens, which unites the hostile elements into one. This synthesis is described in the myth of Isis, and we read, quote, who collected the scattered limbs of his holy and bathed them with her tears and laid them in a secret grave beneath the bank of the Nile. The cognomen of Isis, the Black One, was the Black One. So Isis, meaning the Black One, the abyss. We are in the womb of Isis at this moment, and the limbs of Osiris are being regathered and put back together, and her tears are weeping on him. Meaning this is a time of rain also. The tears of Isis is rain. As I'll show you pictures, I found mushrooms sprouting as I sat down yesterday at the base of a tree. It's to do with the entire cycle of creation in Theogens. The mysteries of Isis were celebrated with the mushroom, also known as the mysteries of Hathor, also known as the Eleusinian mysteries, or the mysteries of Inanna. They are the mysteries of the Christian tradition, which equate to the Christ Mass, or the Last Supper, which Christ had with his 12 disciples. Conveniently, I believe it was 3 days before he died, and then went through the whole process of resurrection. So, or it was 3 days after he was anointed. I continue reading though. Apuleius stresses the blackness of her robe, and since ancient times she was reputed to possess the elixir of life, as well as being adept in sundry magical arts. The notes here we read, Diodorus in Bibliotech History, and then it says that she tried to make the child of the king of Phoenicia immortal by holding him in the fire. Plutarch's Isis and Osiris. She was also called the Old One, and she was rated a pupil of Hermes, or even his daughter. She appears as a teacher of alchemy in the treatise Isis and the prophetess to her son Horus. And this gets to the Zohar and the teachings in the secret Kabbalah, that when Eve was being copulated with by the Spirit, she had the race of heroes, or the sons of God. That's where it says that she was even a daughter, or teaches the art of alchemy. That's where that comes from. The alchemy, the art of alchemy, and the race, the transmission of that knowledge comes from the line of Eve and the sons of God, the hero race, Hercules, which again gets back to the phallic tradition, and it all alludes to the virility and the whole cycle of creation and nature. See John M. Allegro's Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, which we will read more later. To continue here, it says, Isis the prophetess to her son Horus. She is mentioned in the role of a whore in Epiphanius, where she is said to have prostituted herself in Tyre. She signifies earth according to Firmicus Maternus, and was equated with Sophia, or wisdom. She is the thousand named, the vessel and the matter, of good and evil, and she's a symbol for the Amanita muscaria mushroom, the thousand named plant. It contains more of the star fire than any other substance on the planet. You take it into your body. If your temple is prepared, you know how much, you know the secrets, which I'm not going to reveal, then you can take the journey. If you want to contact me and we can speak privately, I'll be more than happy to recommend this, but this is not something that everybody needs to go pursuing. It takes time to prepare your temple in order to allow the spirit to find it a pleasant home to come into. In order to have the full experience, you need to know how, when, who to be around, where to do it. All these things are very crucial. This is why you need a shaman. See my video on Plato and Jesus and shamanism. She is the moon. We're going to read about the moon from Aleister Crowley's The Book of Thoth, which is tied to the title of the whole series, The Dark Night of the Soul. This is where I heard the expression first, was the moon card of the tarot, written by Aleister Crowley. And as you know now, I've discovered that the book, The Dark Night of the Soul, was written by St. John the Divine, in I believe 1574. Deals with this, the intervention. He calls it the divine intervention, God knocking you off the path that you thought you were supposed to be on, to put you on the right path, to make you go through a crushing defeat in order to lose the lust after the sweet taste of victory, so that you could actually focus on getting to know yourself and know that it's not always going to be easy. He had to strengthen you through the dark night of the soul. She is named the Redemptrix. In Anaxagoras, she is the nature of the eon, whence all things grew and by which all things are. All these statements apply just as well to the prima materia in its feminine aspect. It is the moon, the mother of all things, the vessel. It consists of opposites, has 1,000 names, is an old woman and a whore. As Mater Alchemia, it is wisdom and teaches wisdom. It contains the elixir of life in potentia and is the mother of the Savior and of the Filius Macrocosmi. It is the earth and the serpent hidden in the earth, the blackness and the dew and the miraculous water which brings together all that is divided. The water is therefore called Mother. My mother, who is my enemy, but also gathers together all my divided and scattered limbs, which corresponds to the heart chakra, or the cups of the tarot, the mother. The Turba Philosophorum says, nevertheless, the philosophers have put to death the woman who slays her husband, for the body of that woman is full of weapons and poison. Let a grave be dug for that dragon, and let that woman be buried with him, he being chained fast to that woman, and the more he winds and coils himself about her, the more he will be cut to pieces by the female weapons which are fashioned in the body of the woman. And he sees that he is mingled with the limbs of the woman, he will be certain of death, and he will be changed wholly into blood. But when the philosophers see him changed into blood, they leave him a few days in the sun until his softness is consumed. And the blood dries, and they find that poison, which then appears in the hidden wind. This is a recipe which I'm not going to get into right now. The Conjunctio can therefore take more gruesome forms than the relatively harmless one depicted in the Rosarium. It is clear from these parallels that Meyer was fully justified in giving the name Isis to the prima materia, or feminine transformative substance. As Kerényi was brilliantly shown using the example of Medea. And the note here, see, Toktur der Son. Also in the last note from the formative substance, the feminine transformative substance, we read the corresponding masculine substance is red sulfur, the vis, or Cervus rubeus, whose redness relates him to Typhon, and a dirge for Gabricus, who died after recently celebrating his marriage. Meyer does in fact mention Typhon as a possible cause of his death. He begins by saying, quote, she who was the cause of your life is also the cause of your death. But then he adds, there seems to be who may have caused your death, Typhon, your mother, in Mulciber's, or Vulcan's furnace. He, Typhon, scatters the limbs of your body. It may be your mother alone instead of your brother, but your mother feigns innocence. It is clear that Meyer suspects the mother in particular and wants to make Typhon, the red slave, only a causa ministerialis. So this is the harlot and the beast, or the whore riding the beast, also symbolized by the lust card of the tarot. And then the story of Medea's murder of Creon, her father-in-law, was also interpreted as an alchemical arcanum. We continue. There is in that myth a typical combination of various motifs: love, trickery, cruelty, motherliness, murder of relatives and children, magic, rejuvenation, and gold. This same combination appears in Isis and the Prima Materia and forms the core of the drama instigated by the mother world, without which no union seems possible. In Christian tradition, the widow signifies the church. In St. Gregory, Super Exilium Home, we read, the analogy is the story of the widow's cruse of oil. St. Augustine says, the whole church is one widow desolate in the world. She lacketh a husband, lacketh a man, for her bridegroom has not yet come. So too the soul is destitute in the world. But Augustine continues, thou art not an orphan, thou art reckoned as a widow. Thou hast a friend. Thou art God's orphan, God's widow. Another tradition to be considered in regard to the widow is the Kabbalah. There, the abandoned Malkuth, or the root chakra, is the widow. As Nor von Rosenroth says, Almana, widow, this is Malkuth. When Tifereth is not with her, Tifereth is the sixth node, it's the heart. We read here in the Kabbalah Denudata, Norse source is Moses Cordovero, Padres Ramonium, chapter 23. It says, Tifereth is the sun. Again, Kabbalah Denudata, and is interpreted by Rushlin as the microcosm. Malkuth, which means kingdom or dominion, is Domine, the mistress. She is also called Shekinah. She is called the moon, earth, bride, matron, queen of heaven, fish pool, sea, well, tree of knowledge, of good and evil, hind of love. So is Malkuth especially called because of the mystery of the new moon. The indwelling of God, the virago. The Sephirah Tifereth is the king, and in the usual arrangement of the Sephiroth, he occupies the second place. So imagine this, we're about to describe. The four suits of the tarot correspond to the wands, as I've aligned them, the swords, the cups, and the discs. Now we're about to understand how this corresponds to the Kabbalic tree of life, and you can paint the image of man in this and understand how this works. And I'll try to guide you along. Kether being the crown, Tifereth being the king wearing the crown. So you have the first, it goes 1, 6, 9, 10. That's the way it works, 1, 6, 9, and 10. Those are the numbers that correspond to the four main tarot suits, or the four main chakras of our body, which are the root chakra, the heart chakra, the throat chakra, and the crown chakra. We read, Kether, the crown, corresponds to the upward growing root of the tree of the Sephiroth. Yesod signifies the genital region of the origin of the original man, whose head is Kether. Malkuth, conforming to the archetypal pattern, is the underlying feminine principle. In this wicked world ruled by evil, Tifereth is not united with Malkuth, but the coming Messiah will reunite the king and the queen. So in this evil world, this wicked world ruled by evil, it says Tifereth is not united with Malkuth. So that means the man, Tifereth, is the king. The king is not united with the queen, the mistress. But the Messiah will fix this. We continue reading. The Kabbalah develops an elaborate hierogosmos fantasy which expatiates on the union of the soul with the Sephiroth of the worlds of light and darkness, meaning that the true Kabbalah is a whole tree of life and tree of death, and it has heretofore only been recognized as a tree of life. But we need to unite and recognize that it is Isis, it is the darkness, it is the chaos from which the sun is born and the sun returns back into. The mother. is equally important. She begats the Son out of her from the womb. That is the mystery that the Messiah will bring back and is bringing back. The Messiah is just the word of reason, of Logos, manifesting the truth unto man through the words and lips of the prophets. The desire of the upper world for the God-fearing man is as the loving desire of a man for his wife, and he who woos her. Conversely, the Shekinah is present in the sexual act. And this gets back to the creation of life, the continuation of the sexual act. The absconditus sponsus enters into the body of woman and is joined with the absconditus sponsa. So the egg is united with the serpent. Literally, the ovum is united with the sperm. This is true also on the reverse side of the process, so that two spirits are melted together and are interchanged constantly between body and body. In the indistinguishable state which arises, it may be said almost that the male is with the female, neither male nor female. At least they are both or either. So is man affirmed to be composed of the whole world above, which is male, and of the female world below. The same is true of the woman. The Holy Kabbalah. The Kabbalah also speaks of the thalamus, or the bride chamber, or nuptial canopy, beneath which sponsus and sponsa are consecrated. Yesod, acting as the paranephensis, the best man, and this is all corresponding to parts of the brain too. I want you to understand that the thalamus, Yesod, the Kether, corresponds to the four key parts of our brain, which would be the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, the thalamus, and the amygdala. So the amygdala would correspond to Yesod. It like stimulates, it sends the signal to the crown to do the work, I believe. Directly or indirectly, the Kabbalah was assimilated into alchemy. Relationships must have existed between them at the very early date, though it is difficult to trace them in the sources. Late in the 16th century, we come upon direct quotations from the Zohar. For instance, in the treatise De Igne et Sale by Blasius Vigorinus. One passage in the treatise is of a special interest to us as it concerns the mythologium of the Conjunctio. The Sephiroth ended Malkuth, or the moon, who is the last to descend and the first to ascend from the elemental world. For the moon is the way to heaven, so much so that Pythagoreans named her the heavenly earth and the earthly heaven or star. Proclus, Commentaries of the Timaeus of Plato, where he says that Orpheus called the moon the heavenly earth and the Pythagoreans the etheric earth. 32b. Because in the elemental world, all inferior nature is in respect to the heavenly, and the heavenly in respect to the intelligible world is, as the Zohar says, feminine and passive, and is as the moon to the sun. In the same measure, the moon withdraws from the sun until she is in opposition to him. So does her light increase in relation to us in the lower world, but diminishes on the side that looks upward. Contrariwise, in her conjunction, when she is totally darkened for us, she is fully illuminated on that side which faces the sun. This should teach us that the more our intellect descends to the things of sense, the more it is turned away from the intelligible things, and the reverse likewise. So the more that we focus on sense and the five senses, the less that we can tune into the spiritual world, is what it's teaching us. The identification of Malkuth with Luna, with the root, the moon, so you have the sun and the moon in opposites, they come together to form the spirits that create life. You call it the air and the water. The identification of Malkuth with Luna forms a link with alchemy and is another example of the process by which the patristic system, symbolism of sponsus and sponsa, had been assimilated much earlier. At the same time, it is a repetition of the way the originally pagan hierogasmos was absorbed into the figurative language of the Church Fathers. But Vigenerus adds something that seems to be lacking in patristic allegory, namely the darkening of the other half of the moon during her opposition. When the moon turns upon us her fullest radiance, her other side is in complete darkness. This strict application of the Sol Luna allegory might have been an embarrassment to the Church, although the idea of, quote, dying church does take account to a certain extent of the transience of all created things. I do not mention this fact in order to criticize the significance of the ecclesiastical Sol-Luna allegory. On the contrary, I want to emphasize it because the moon standing on the borders of the sublunary world ruled by evil has a share not only in the world of light but also in the demonic world of darkness, as our author clearly hints. So we've come into the demonic world of darkness, if you will, at this time of year, and hence Saturn is the ruling planet of Capricorn, and he is depicted as death, wearing all black, riding a dragon and carrying a scythe and a staff. The Grim Reaper is the supreme symbol of the Lord of the demons. He is the Lord of the dead. We continue. This is why her changefulness is so significant symbolically. She is duplex and mutable like Mercurius, and is like him a mediator, hence their identification in alchemy. Jung, the spirit Mercurius, tells us that Luna and Mercury are coordinated or correspond to the same thing. Thoth in Egypt mythology was considered the god of the moon. And the symbol for Mercury shows the sign of Venus with the symbol of the moon on his head. The quotation from Vigenerus bears no little resemblance to a long passage on the phases of the moon in Augustine. Speaking of the unfavorable aspect of the moon, which is her changeability, he paraphrases Ecclesiasticus with the words, quote, "The wise man remaineth stable as the sun, but a fool is as changed as the moon," and poses the question, who then is the fool who changes as the moon but Adam, in whom all have sinned? For Augustine, therefore, the moon is manifestly an ally of corruptible creatures, reflecting their folly and inconstancy. Since for the men of antiquity and the Middle Ages, comparison with the stars or planets tacitly presupposes astrological causality, the sun causes constancy and wisdom, while the moon is the cause of change and folly, including lunacy. Soul corresponds to the conscious man, Luna to the unconscious one, i.e. to his anima. Note 135. Augustine attaches to his remarks about the moon a moral observation concerning the relationship of man to the spiritual sun. He says, quote, "For man's soul, when it turns away from the sun of righteousness, that is, from inward contemplation, or the unchangeable truth, turns all its strength to earthly things, and thereby is darkened more and more in its inward and higher parts. But when it begins to return to that unchangeable wisdom, where it most draws nigh thereto in loving affection, the more is the outward man corrupted, but the inward man is renewed from day to day, and all that light of natural disposition which was turned toward lower things is directed to the higher, and in a certain wise is taken away from the things of earth, that it may die more and more to this world, and its life be hid with Christ in God." This is what the dark night of the soul, written by St. John the Divine, is all about. The dying away, to read this, more and more to this world, to die more and more to this world. This is the circumcision, the spiritual circumcising yourself from the illusion. This is absconding yourself from the cave of Plato and freeing yourself into the realization of freedom. Here we continue reading. Augustine attaches to his remarks about the moon a moral observation, just as Vigenerus did, who is obviously acquainted with Augustine's epistles. He also mentions the church's Luna, and he connects the moon with the wounding by an arrow. The arrow is a sign of Mercury as well, and Cupid, and love and the mysteries, and also the Amanita muscaria itself. It's also a symbol for the cross. The arrow is a runic symbol for the Tau, and the Tau, or the sound th in the Greek, is Therion, the symbol for the dragon. And the dragon, the moon, was said to have a dragon in it, where its ascending node of the moon's ecliptic orbit was called Caput Draconis, the head of the dragon. Its descending node, or the tail of the dragon, was called Cadua Draconis. So the church is connected to the dragon in that sense also, as is Mercury. It is clear that Augustine did not understand the wounding as the activity of the new moon herself, but in accordance with the principle omne malum ab homine, as the result of man's wickedness. All the same, the addition in obscura luna, for which there is no warrant in the original text, shows how much the new moon is evolved. This hint of the admitted dangerousness of moon is confirmed when Augustine, a few sentences later on, cites Psalm 71:7. In his days justice shall flourish in abundance of peace until the moon shall be destroyed. Instead of the strong interferer, the vulgate has the milder offerator, shall be taken away or fail. The violent way in which the moon is removed is explained by the interpretation that immediately follows. It says, that is, the abundance of peace shall grow until it consumes in changefulness of mortality. From this it is evident that the moon's nature expressly partakes of the changefulness of mortality, but is equivalent to death, and therefore the text continues, for then the last enemy, death, shall be destroyed, and whatever resisteth us on account of the weakness of the flesh shall be utterly consumed. Now see, this is the good news that they're talking about, and Jesus in the Bible says they're mistaken. It is not, he's not the God of death, he's the God of life. It's not the way of death, it is the way of life. So calling her the God of death or making her over death is false, because you see, the Son came out of her. That makes her the God of life. Just like this 3-day period is symbolic of her womb that we're re-entering and about to re-enter out of. Because if we stayed in this womb, all this would end. But through her graciousness and through her creative, infinite ability, she issues forth the Son again, and the entire cosmos continues on for eternity. Reciprocity, recreating itself for an eternity, literally an infinite amount of time. Something that we literally cannot comprehend as human beings. We can write proofs about it, and we can say things and tell stories about, monkeys punching keys on typewriters in a giant warehouse for a given amount of time. Ultimately, one of the monkeys would end up punching out all the manuscripts of Shakespeare perfectly without a typo. That's infinity, and that's just a story to try and help you understand, like, anything's possible, literally. So if anything is possible, why would you assume that anything is permanent? Okay, that's the thing. And by permanent, I mean the end of this thing we perceive. You got some cedar smelling breath. Yeah, you got some cedar breath. You've been brushing your teeth with cedar this morning? Good boy. So we continue reading. Go on. To eliminate the moon from creation is therefore as desirable as the elimination of death. This negative assessment of the moon takes full account of her dark side. The dying of the church is also connected with the mystery of the moon's darkness. Augustine's cautious and perhaps not altogether unconscious disguising of the sinister aspect of the moon would be sufficiently explained by his respect for the Ecclesia Luna equation. All the more ruthlessly, therefore, does alchemy insist on the dangerousness of the new moon. Luna is on the one hand the brilliant whiteness of the full moon. On the other hand, she is the blackness of the new moon, and especially the blackness of the eclipse when the sun is darkened. This gets to the mysteries of Isis, and Kali in Hindu mythology is represented as the destroyer. And the river, the Nile, can rise and flood and destroy as well as rise and bring the life-giving water. So it's a mysterious. She has a creative and a destructive potential, which makes her mysterious. And the third Atu in the Thoth Tarot deck of the Trumps Tarot deck is the Empress, and it shows on either side of the Empress the waxing and the waning moon, illustrating this principle of the mystery of her potential to both give and take. Indeed, what she does to the sun comes from her own dark nature. She's equatable to the wheel of fortune, or karma, as well, the hand of fate. The Concilium Coniungi tells us very clearly what the alchemist thought about Luna. The lion, the lower sun, grows corrupt through the flesh. His flesh is weak because he suffers from quartan fever. Thus the lion, corrupted in his nature through his flesh, which follows the times of the moon, and is eclipsed for the moon is the shadow of the sun. And with the corruptible body she is consumed, and through her corruption is the lion eclipsed with the help of the moisture of Mercurius. Yet his eclipse is changed to usefulness into a better nature and one more perfect than the first. The changefulness of the moon and her ability to grow dark are interpreted as her corruptibility, and this negative quality can even darken the sun. The text continues, during the increase that is during the fullness of the blackness of the lead, which is our ore, my light is absent and my splendor is put out. This is a reference to the astrotheological time of year. During the increase, that is the fullness of the blackness of the lead, which is our ore, my light is absent and my splendor is put out. Then comes a passage, and that's the death of the soul and the dying of the ego. Then comes a passage which may have inspired the picture of the death of the royal pair in Rosarium, but which is also significant as regards to the dark side of the conjunction of Sol and Luna. It reads, "After this is completed, you will know that you have the substance which penetrates all substances, and the nature which contains all nature, and the nature which rejoices in nature, the thing which rejoices in itself, the Ouroboros. It is named the Tyriac of the philosophers, and it is also called the poisonous serpent, because like this it bites off the head of the male in the lustful heat of conception, and giving birth it dies and is divided through the midst." Now, when a spermatozoon penetrates the ovum, it literally is beheaded and sucked into the egg, and they become a new life form after 3 days. So also the moisture of the moon, when she receives his light, slays the sun, and at the birth of the child of the philosopher, she dies likewise. And at the death, the two parents yield up their souls to the sun, and die and pass away, and the parents are the food of the sun. So the two original become one. This is the mystery of recreation. This is the mystery being revealed of the entire process of life and the fractal cosmic, our sperm connecting with the egg and the ovum, the penis going into the vagina and releasing the life-giving, life-recreating substance, and it's going in and being overcome by the more passive egg in the womb. So the virile being overcome by the passive, and both of them dying to give food to the newborn son, the new life, the spark of fire that they've created by coming together and killing one another. One kills the other and sacrifices herself. This is the mystery, the deep mystery that's going on right now above us in the heavens and in the skies as well. And when you understand it all, how can you not be in awe of the wonder of nature and how everything is fractal? We are all the same, carrying out in an infinite number of ways. It is the most beautiful kaleidoscope that you could really ever imagine. I'm continually dumbfounded and amazed by the power of magic, which is all creation. We continue reading. In this psychologium, all the implications of the Sol-Luna allegory are carried to their logical conclusion. The demonic quality which is connected with the dark side of the moon, or with her position midway between heaven and the sublunary world, displays its full effect. Sun and moon reveal their antithetical nature, which in the Christian Sol-Luna relationship is so obscured as to be unrecognizable, and the two opposites cancel each other out, their impact resulting in accordance with the laws of energetics in the birth of a third and new thing. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Pythagoras was giving us this information. A son who resolves the antagonisms of the parents and is himself a united double nature. The unknown author of the Concilium was not conscious of the close connection of his psychologium with the process of transubstantiation, which is what happened at the Last Supper. And the doctrine of transubstantiation was a false thing instituted by the Catholic Church long after to replace the true efficacy of the mysteries of taking the plants and the herbs to have a spiritual or an entheogenic experience, to transubstantiate your soul. Although the last sentence of the text contains clearly enough the motif of Teoqualo, the god-eating of the Aztecs. See, the Aztecs are from Mexico, and in the mountains of Guatemala, where G. Gordon Wasson went to find the psilocybin cubensis mushrooms, is what they're talking about here in this, the god-eating of the Aztecs. The Mayans were also a mushroom cult. See Carl Borhegi. His father and him have both done extensive research into this aspect. This motif is also found in ancient Egypt. The pyramid text of Unis says, "Unis rising as a soul like a god who liveth upon his fathers and feedeth upon his mothers." It should be noted how alchemy put in the place of the Christian sponsus and sponsa an image of totality that on the one hand was material and on the other was spiritual and corresponded to the paraclete. In addition, there was a certain trend in the direction of an ecclesia spiritualis. The alchemical equivalent of the God-man and the Son of God was Mercurius, who was an hermaphrodite, contained in himself both the feminine element, the sapientia and matter, the masculine, the Holy Ghost, and the devil. This is the archetype that Jesus Christ himself was. It's what he represented. It's what his teachings are getting at if you read them clearly. And in the Gnostic traditions, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and all of it. There are relations in alchemy with the Holy Ghost movement. In fact, he was a magi. Jesus Christ was a magi, as was his mother Mary. If you look at Leonardo da Vinci's painting that he did for his life entitled The Adoration of the Magi, maybe a tapestry, but it's a very large piece, and it shows Mary holding the baby, and he has a halo, but all the people are like, dumbfounded by the power radiating off of the pair. They can't even look at them. And it says magi, and that's plural for magus. Magus is wise man or shaman, if you will. So Mary and Jesus were shamans. And they come from the line that descended from the sons of God that came from the creation of Eve copulating with the spirits. That's the truth they don't want you to know. And this isn't some Dan Brown fiction, this is real. It should be noted how alchemy put in the place of the Christian sponsa and sponsus. The image of totality on the one hand was material, and on the other one was spiritual, corresponding to the paraclete. There are relations in alchemy with the Holy Ghost movement, which flourished in the 13th and 14th centuries, and was chiefly connected with the name of Joachim of Flora, who lived 1145 to 1202, who expected the imminent coming of the third kingdom, namely of the Holy Ghost. The alchemist also represented the eclipse as the descent of the sun into the feminine mercurial fountain, or as the disappearance of Gabrius into the body of Bea, the sexual act. Again, the sun, in the embrace of the new moon, is treacherously slain by the snake bite, Conatu Viperino, of the beloved mother, or pierced by the Tellum Passionis, Cupid's arrow. These ideas explain the strange picture in Rusner's Pandora, showing Christ being pierced with a lance by a crowned virgin whose body ends in a serpent's tail. The drawing of this tale is certainly odd, and one wonders whether it represents water or steam. The prototype of the picture can be found in the so-called Drivolatagic books, Codex Germanicus Monacensis, as well as in the Codex German. There she has a proper snake's tail. One text described the vapors as arrows. The eagles armed with arrows in the picture of Hermes Trismegistus from Senior Psychology and Alchemy. The oldest reference to the mermaid in alchemy is a quotation from Hermes in Olympiodorus. The virginal earth is found in the tail of the virgin. On the analogy of the wounded Christ, Adam is shown in the Codex Ashburum, pierced in the side by an arrow. The motif of wounding is taken up by the Honorius of Autun in his commentary on the Song of Songs. Thou hast wounded my heart, my sister, my spouse. Thou hast wounded my heart with one of thy eyes, and with one hair of thy neck. The sponsa says, I am black but comely, and look not upon me because I am black, because the sun hath scorched me. This allusion to the negrito, i.e. death, which we'll read about later, was not missed by the alchemist. But there is another and more dangerous reference to the bride. Thou art beautiful, O my love, as Tisra, comely as Jerusalem, terrible as an army with banners. Turn away thine eyes from me, for they have overcome me. Who is this that looketh forth at the rising dawn? Fair as the moon, bright as the sun, terrible as an army with banners. The bride is not only lovely and innocent, but witch-like and terrible, like the side of Selene that is related to Hecate. Like her Luna is an all-seeing and all-knowing eye. Like Hecate, she sends madness, epilepsy, and other sickness. Her special field is love magic and magic in general, in which the new moon, the full moon, and the moon's darkness play a great part. The animals assigned to her are the stag, the lion, and the cock. The cock is also the line for the rising sun, or the sign for the rising sun, and Mercurius are also symbols of her male partner in alchemy, i.e. Thoth. As the chthonic Persephone, her animals, according to Pythagoras, are dogs, i.e. the planets. In alchemy, Luna herself appears as the Armenian bitch. The sinister side of the moon plays a considerable role in the classical tradition. The sponsa is the dark new moon in Christian interpretation of the church and nuptial embrace, and the union is at the same time a wounding of the sponsus, soul or Christ. Honorius comments on Thou hast wounded my heart as follows. By heart is signified love, which is said to be in the heart, and he is container, is put in the place of the contained. So, he is container, and the container is put in the place of the contained. And this metaphor is taken from the lover who loves his beloved exceeding much, so that his heart is wounded with love. So is Christ upon the Christ, wounded for love, on the cross, wounded for the love of his church. So the sun stopped its movement, and because of this stop, it had to look back on its motion, its momentum, carrying it in the direction that it had been going, and change, and turn back a complete 180 degrees, repent. So the sun is repenting, it's changing this time of year. That's another very significant thing. When you die, you judge yourself, you're stopping your momentum that you've been progressing this way, and you're going to repent to be resurrected, to receive redemption, going back in the other direction. Thou didst first wound my heart when I scourged for thy love, that I might make thee my sister. Again thou didst wound my heart with one of thine eyes when hanging upon the cross. I was wounded for love of thee, and I might make thee my bride to share my glory. The moment of the eclipse in the mystic marriage is death on the cross. In the Middle Ages, the cross was therefore logically understood as the mother. So death, the symbol of Christian, is the symbol of life, but it's also the symbol of death. Thus, in the Middle English dispute between Mary and the cross is a false tree that destroyed Mary's fruit with a deadly drink. She laments, "My sonny stepmother, I thee call." Sancta Crux replies, "Lady, to thee I owe honor. Thy fruit me flourisheth in blood color." The motif of wounding in alchemy goes back to Zosimos and his visions of a sacrificial drama. The motif does not occur in such a complete form again. One next meets it in the turba. The dew is joined to him who is wounded and given over to death. The dew comes from the moon, and he who is wounded in the sun. And the dew is the Amrita, it's the everlasting life, it's the star fire, it's the love, the pure love, it's the good news, it's the knowledge of everlasting life. It is literally the rewiring of the DNA and the coming back alive. In the treatise of Philoletha, Introtitus, Apparitus, and Oculusum Regis Palatium, the wounding is caused by the bite of the rabid Coracine dog, in the consequence of which the hermaphrodite child suffered from hydrophobia. We read on the note, "This is the infant hermaphrodite, who is from his very cradle has been bitten by the mad Coracine dog, wherefore he rages in madness with perpetual fear of water. The rabid black dog is chased away with water and blows, and thus will the darkness be dispelled. But this, it can be seen that the mad dog represents the Negrito, and thus, indirectly, the dark new moon, which eclipses the sun." This leads me to think of Steppenwolf, von Steppenwolf. And in the story, the book von Steppenwolf, he always talks about being followed by the black dog, the evil black dog, being stoned in the street and killed. And this is where he got that allegory from, that story from. We continue reading. Dorn, in his De Tenebris Contra Naturam, associates the motif of wounding and the poisonous snake bite with Genesis. For the sickness introduced into nature by the serpent and the deadly wound she inflicted, a remedy is to be sought. Accordingly, it is the task of alchemy to root out the original sin, and this is accomplished by the aid of the balsam vitul, the balsam of life, which is a true mixture of the natural heat with its radiant, radical moisture. The life of the world is the light of nature and the celestial sulfur, whose substance is the etheric moisture and the heat of the firmament, like unto the sun and the moon. This is the philosopher's stone. This is the star fire that the Amanita muscaria mushroom contains more of than anything else on the planet, that activates your third eye, that wakes you up spiritually fully. When taken properly under the right guidance of a shaman, it can and will do it, if your body and your spirit are ready. Because the spirit will not come into a temple that is not prepared. The conjunction of the moist and the hot thus produces the balsam. And this is significant at this time of year as well, the moist and the hot. So you have a combination of the moist and the hot. Earth and fire, when combined, create air and water. So then you have the combination of the moist and the hot, because the water makes the air, which is normally dry and hot, moist. And it also, the fire makes the air, which is normally or the water which is normally cool, hot. And this is the union that creates life, the magic, truly, the life of the world. And in Genesis chapter 3:15, to bring this full circle and end it here, based upon the beginning video, which I read from St. John the Divine's, or when actually I read from the Anabaptist writers and quoted, who did I quote? Protestant Restoration, Martin Luther. Yes, and I quoted Martin Luther from the book of the Christian and Anabaptist writers, and it left off on this quote, because remember I did a book divination. So here we go. Genesis 3:15, he shall bruise your head and you shall bruise his heel, was generally taken as a prefiguration of the Redeemer, but since Christ was free from the stain of sin, the wiles of the serpent could not touch him, though of course mankind was poisoned. But see, this is false too, and this was taken from Doran's writings. Christ was not free of sin. He makes it clear that he was not. He says, do not call me good. This is in the Bible, Mark. Christ says, do not call me good. The only one who is truly good is God, the Father. The Christian belief is that man is freed from sin by the redemptory act of Christ. This is a false belief. Christ never said that if I was to die, you would all be freed from your sins forever, and I'm going to give myself up for that. No, those words never came out of his mouth. He died for his own sins if he did die, and he did eventually die, as all men die, for our sins, corrupting the temple, because when we're born with the seed of destruction already inside us, the seed of sin, and we're all sinners until we can all elevate free back up to a place where we're no longer encapsulated in the material, and our spirit is free again to be like the star, our Father who art in heaven, the sun, pure energy, pure fire. But right now we're a mixture of earth and fire, of opposites. We're a paradox. I love you all.